We all know the myth of the Kraken, that monster with giant tentacles that terrified sailors and was capable of dragging entire ships into the depths. For centuries, these stories were told in ports and taverns, passing from generation to generation, each time a little more embellished and also a little more terrifying. And honestly, its origin is actually a curious mix of real sightings, Nordic folklore, and logically, a good touch of medieval exaggeration. Probably ancient encounters with giant squids or poorly understood marine phenomena were the perfect fuel to build the legend, because it is clear that it is only that, a beast taken from our imagination. Well, or maybe not. Once again, science confirms that sometimes reality surpasses fiction. The latest findings make the seas of the past look much more like those stories that today we consider pure fantasy. Not exactly like in Pirates of the Caribbean, but not that far either. It turns out that a new scientific study estimates that between 100 and 70 million years ago, our oceans could have been inhabited by gigantic cephalopods. Basically, octopuses that could have reached sizes of up to 19 oberabers. And these are a lot of meters, huh? To give you an idea, we are talking about something equivalent to an articulated bus, one of those that look like an accordion, to a whole bowling lane, or to 4 adult giraffes placed one on top of the other. But it is not just a matter of size. Everything points to the fact that they were carnivores, and that they probably occupied very high positions within the food chain. That is, in those seas, perhaps not only the great marine reptiles ruled, there may have been something else down there that could measure up to them head to head, something soft, enormous, and lethal. We will go into more detail later, but first we will have to know how the existence of these giant creatures has been discovered. Fossils are like time capsules that allow paleontologists to reconstruct the history of life. Normally, we talk about bones, teeth, or even footprints that have endured millions of years thanks to the process of mineralization. But with animals like octopuses, we have a huge problem. They do not have bones or shells like other living beings, so their body is so soft that their tissues disappear quickly without leaving a trace. Basically, finding their fossils is usually extremely complicated, although, well, it is not completely impossible. There's a part of their anatomy that can be preserved. Their jaws, also called beaks, are made of chitin, a material that under very specific conditions can resist the passage of time and become fossilized. And this is exactly what they used for the study. 27 fossil jaws of giant octopuses from the Cretaceous. But not only that, pay attention because this is very cool. 12 of these jaws were found in Japan, although, well, in reality they were completely hidden inside a type of rock that was too fragile to be able to extract the fossils using the usual methods. So the scientists used a new technique that is known as digital fossil mining. They had to do something radical, destroy the rock to be able to save them digitally. What they did was wear away the rock layer by layer, very carefully and taking high-definition photos of each cut. In the end, the physical sample disappears, yes, but in exchange, you are left with a massive data set. And this is where artificial intelligence comes in. The AI takes those thousands of photos, processes them with crazy precision, and helps to separate, in the images, what is the fossil from what is the rock. And then, well, they are assembled to create a 3D model, resulting in a digital fossil, which is an exact replica of the original. In addition, this method has another brutal advantage. Traditionally, fossils are extracted using chisel and drill, and no matter how careful you are, you can always end up damaging them. With digital mining, that does not happen. This allows the preservation of original microscopic marks, from which researchers can extract astonishing hypotheses. And here we come to the second part of the video. Once we have the fossils, what information can we get from them? Well, the scientists were able to describe 2 different species. By the way, we are not talking about the octopuses that you are probably imagining, those that hide on the beach among rocks. They belong to the Suret group. That is more similar to current deep-sea species that have elongated bodies and swim with the help of fins. They were also able to estimate the real size of these prehistoric octopuses. Of course, it is an extrapolation using the proportions of different current cephalopods and the measurement of their jaws. Today, our seas hide giant squids that are the largest living invertebrate we know. Their females can reach up to 12 ounces in length, which is already an absolute barbarity, but it is nothing if we compare it with these beasts of the past that could reach 19 meters. But it is that this size rivaled and even surpassed that of the great marine reptiles of the time. To give you an idea, the famous mosasaurs measured up to 17 millimeters and the pliosaurs reached up to 12. We are talking about the most feared predators of the Cretaceous. A time that we have always called the era of vertebrates, that an invertebrate like these octopuses could look such titans head to head, well, it completely breaks what we believed we knew about who ruled in the prehistoric oceans. And well, it is true that for now, we have only talked about size, and being large does not necessarily mean being a terrible predator, But this is where the extreme wear of their jaws comes in. That wear is much greater than what we see in current octopuses. They have chipping and scratches that suggest that these octopuses crushed skeletons, shells, and bones of their prey. Basically, they had an incredibly powerful and lethal bite. And another super curious thing, the right edge of the jaws was much more worn than the left. This pattern tells us that they did not bite in just any way, but that they had a lateralized behavior. So that we understand each other, it is the equivalent of being right-handed or left-handed. These octopuses preferred to use a specific side of their mouth to destroy their prey. This may seem like a trivial thing, but in reality, it is a very valuable piece of data. Using one side of the body preferentially is directly related to very complex brain functions. That is, it could mean that their brain distributed tasks to gain efficiency, which indicates a highly developed brain. This is something that already happens with current octopuses, for example. Although they have 8 arms, they do not use them all equally. They have a favorite arm to explore objects or to launch themselves to hunt. And the high intelligence of octopuses is more than documented in different studies and is comparable to that of many vertebrates. An example is that they can use tools. For example, the coconut octopus collects empty coconut shells, cleans them, and transports them over long distances to use them later as a poor table shelter. This is crazy because it implies planning for the future, since the animal carries a heavy object that is not useful to it at the moment, but knows that it will need it later. In summary, and returning to our octopuses, it is likely that these krakens were not only gigantic eating machines, but were already intelligent predators 100 million years ago. And why is this so interesting? Well, you will see, these animals lived in the late Cretaceous, the period that ended with the famous asteroid impact that wiped almost all the dinosaurs off the map. And while today's large cephalopods have retreated to the depths, our protagonists inhabited shallow waters. Until now, we thought that in those seas, the only kings were the large vertebrates we have talked about. And what happened with the invertebrates? Well, we believe that they were simply victims, basically the food. In fact, many evolved with increasingly thick and complex shells to try not to be devoured. But suddenly, Nanematodes hagarty appears, our kraken, a huge animal with extremely powerful jaws and most likely intelligent. It seems clear that it was not any victim. It was a fierce predator that competed head-to-head with anyone at the top of the food chain. That is, there's the possibility that an octopus the size of 2 buses hunted marine reptiles. And well, the truth is that imagining such a scene is quite cool, and this would mean that vertebrates and cephalopods followed almost identical evolutionary strategies to become super predators, intelligent and dominate the seas.